The wind screamed across the Montana plains at 50 miles per hour, driving snow sideways and creating a wind chill of -78 degrees. But Ben Carter's cabin, perched on the southern rim of Eagle Canyon just 12 feet from the edge, sat in perfect calm. The canyon created an updraft that deflected the north wind up and over his location, leaving a pocket of still air where the temperature held at -12 degrees, a 66-degree effective difference. His horse, Ranger, stood in the barn 20 feet back from the rim, protected by the same phenomenon. The most dangerous house that everyone said would blow into the canyon or freeze from exposure was now the warmest, most sheltered structure in the territory. 8 months earlier, folks had called him suicidal when Ben filed his claim on the canyon rim. The town banker said the first strong wind would blow the house into the gorge. The mayor predicted the cliff would collapse under the structure's weight. Even experienced ranchers who'd survived 30 Montana winters shook their heads and called it the worst building site they'd ever seen. But Ben had learned something working cattle drives through Arizona. Canyon rims created unique wind patterns. The updraft from the canyon itself deflected prevailing winds, creating sheltered zones right at the edge. Now, while every ranch on the exposed plains fought killing wind chills, Ben's rim cabin stayed calm and relatively warm. When the blizzard ended, folks would learn that sometimes the most dangerous-looking location was actually the safest. Ben Carter was 27 when he claimed his land. He'd spent 5 years working cattle drives through Arizona and New Mexico, learning the landscape in ways most Montana ranchers never would. One drive brought them near the Grand Canyon in winter. Ben expected the rim to be the worst place, exposed, windswept, deadly. Instead, he found something unexpected. The canyon created its own weather. Warm air rising from the depths met cold air above, creating complex wind patterns. On the north rim, wind blasted across exposed rock, but on the south rim, at specific locations, updrafts from the canyon deflected the north wind up and over, creating pockets of calm. Ben stood in one such pocket during a winter storm, sheltered while wind screamed 20 feet to his left and right. The canyon rim, at the right spot, was a haven. He learned more on other drives. Canyons didn't just create one effect, they created multiple microclimates depending on position, depth, and orientation. A house built in the right spot on a canyon rim could be more protected than a house on flat ground. When Ben came to Montana looking for land, he found Eagle Canyon, a deep gorge running east-west for 5 miles, 300 feet deep, with sheer sandstone walls. Most ranchers avoided it, seeing only danger. Ben saw opportunity. He spent 2 weeks studying the wind patterns, tying ribbons to stakes at different positions along the rim. He found what he was looking for. A spot on the southern rim where updrafts from the canyon consistently deflected north winds upward, creating a protected zone. Every rancher in Silver Ridge thought he'd lost his mind. "You can't build on a canyon rim," said Robert Walsh, who owned the general store and considered himself the voice of frontier wisdom. "First strong wind, your house goes into the gorge. That's suicide." "The updraft protects against north wind," Ben explained. "The canyon deflects it upward before it reaches my location." "Updraft?" Robert laughed. "Son, wind is wind. It doesn't matter if there's a hole in the ground. Wind will knock your house right off that cliff." "Wind follows the path of least resistance," Ben said. "Rising warm air from the canyon meets the north wind and deflects it upward. Creates a calm zone right at the rim." "That's not how weather works," Robert said with absolute certainty. "I've lived here 28 years. Wind on the plains goes in a straight line. A canyon doesn't change that. You're going to die."
Ben paid for his supplies and left. Marcus Brennan, the wealthiest rancher in the county, rode out to inspect Ben's claim.
Marcus was 50, owned 4,000 acres, and was convinced his success proved his judgment. "Carter, you claimed land on the canyon rim?" "Yes, sir. 12 feet back from the edge." "That's insane! That's beyond insane!" Marcus dismounted, walked to the rim, looked down 300 feet. "This cliff could collapse at any moment. You put a heavy structure on the edge, you'll trigger a landslide. You and your house will be at the bottom of the canyon." "The sandstone here has been stable for thousands of years," Ben said. "I've studied the geology. No evidence of recent cliff failure. The rock is solid." "Solid until you put weight on it," Marcus said. "And even if the cliff doesn't collapse, the wind will destroy you. You're completely exposed up here. No trees, no hills, nothing to block the wind. Winter storms will hit this rim with full force." "The canyon creates an updraft," Ben explained. "It deflects the north wind." "The canyon creates an updraft," Marcus mocked. "Listen to yourself. You sound like a snake oil salesman. There's no such thing as a protective updraft. Wind is wind. Up here, you'll face the worst wind in the territory." "We'll see," Ben said. Dr. Harrison, the town physician, visited a week later. He was 62, had practiced medicine on the frontier for 30 years, and genuinely cared about people. "Ben, your father was a patient of mine. Good man. He'd want me to talk sense into you." "I appreciate that, Doc." "Building on a canyon rim is suicide. I've treated men who fell from cliffs. Those who survived were never the same. You're putting yourself 12 feet from a 300-foot drop. One slip, one moment of carelessness, and you're dead." "I'm careful, Doc, and the location is solid." "And the isolation? The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. If you're injured, if you need help, no one can reach you quickly. In a medical emergency, that delay kills." "I'm young and healthy. I'll be fine." "You're young and foolish," Doc said, not unkindly. "Please reconsider. Choose land on the flat plains like everyone else. Safe, accessible, proven." "The plains are exposed to full wind force," Ben said. "The rim is protected by the canyon updraft." "There's no such thing as a protective updraft," Doc's voice rose. "That's fantasy. Wind doesn't care about canyons. It'll hit you with full force." At the church social that Sunday, Ben's rim house became the scandal of the evening. "He'll blow into the canyon," said Robert Walsh. "First winter storm, the wind will knock his house right off the cliff." "If wind doesn't get him, the cliff will collapse," said Marcus Brennan. "Put a heavy log cabin on the edge of a cliff, basic physics says it'll trigger a landslide." "It's tragic," said Martha Walsh, Robert's wife. "Such a capable young man, good with horses, hard-working, but he has this death wish." Only one person didn't join the condemnation. Claire Harrison, the doctor's daughter, was 24 and had studied natural sciences at a women's college in Boston. She understood meteorology better than most. She found Ben outside. "Is it true you're building on the canyon rim?" "Yes." "Everyone says you're going to die." "Everyone's measuring by plains standards. Different location, different physics." Ben explained about canyon updrafts, about how warm air rising from the canyon depths created a barrier that deflected horizontal winds upward. Claire thought about it. "The science isn't crazy. Canyons do create their own weather patterns. But it's still risky. If you're wrong about the updraft location." "I've tested it for 2 weeks. Ribbons at different heights, different positions. The updraft is consistent." "And if it changes?"
If conditions shift, then I'll adapt. But I don't think it will. This is geology and physics, not luck. I hope you're right, Claire said. Because if you're wrong, you'll be dead. Behind them, someone called his project Carter's Cliff. The name spread.
By the end of the social, half the town used it, and bets were placed on how long Ben would last before falling to his death or abandoning the claim. Ben went back to his rim and started building. The construction took 5 months. Every wagon load of lumber had to be hauled across 5 miles of plains, then carefully positioned near the canyon rim. Ben spent 3 weeks building a temporary winch system to prevent materials from blowing into the canyon during construction, a series of ropes, pulleys, and anchors that could secure lumber even in strong wind. The cabin itself was standard frontier design, 18 feet by 22 feet, log walls chinked with clay and moss, pitched roof to shed snow. But Ben made critical modifications for rim life that drew constant criticism. First, he positioned the cabin 12 feet back from the rim, not at the very edge. Close enough to benefit from the updraft protection, far enough back for safety and structural stability. He dug foundation trenches 4 feet deep, deeper than standard frontier construction, and filled them with rock and packed earth, creating an anchor that wouldn't shift even under extreme conditions. Each corner post sat on a flat stone base 18 inches square, distributing weight and preventing settling. Second, he oriented the cabin with the long axis running east-west, parallel to the canyon. This minimized the profile facing north, reducing wind load if any wind did reach the site. The south side, facing across the canyon toward the opposite rim, received maximum sunlight reflected off the sandstone walls, free heat during the day that would help warm the cabin. Third, he built the north wall with smaller windows and heavier construction, logs notched tighter, chinking applied thicker, while the south wall had 4 large windows to capture reflected light and solar heat from the canyon. This asymmetric design was unusual and drew immediate criticism. Fourth, he built the barn 20 feet north of the cabin, creating a windbreak for the small space between them. Any wind that did reach the rim would hit the barn first, losing energy, creating a secondary protected zone where Ben could work protected even in moderate wind. Fifth, he installed a lightning rod system, critical on an exposed rim where the cabin would be one of the highest points. A copper rod extended 8 feet above the roof peak, connected by heavy wire to a ground anchor driven 10 feet into the earth. Robert Walsh came out to watch, bringing a surveyor named Thomas Reed and a builder named John Mills. They stood staring at the foundation trenches, like they were examining evidence of insanity.
"Carter, those trenches are way too close to the rim."
Ben looked up from his work, fitting stones into the trench. "They're 12 feet back, Mr. Walsh. Plenty of safety margin."
12 feet from a 300-foot drop? That's nothing. You're asking for disaster."
The surveyor, Thomas, nodded vigorously. "I've surveyed cliffland. We recommend minimum 30 feet back from any edge. 12 feet is suicidal." "Show me evidence of a collapse here," Ben said calmly. "I've studied the rim for 2 miles in both directions. The rock is solid sandstone, no fractures, no seeps, no instability. I've examined the strata. The layers are horizontal and well cemented. This cliff has been stable for thousands of years." "Until you put weight on it," John Mills said. He was an experienced builder who'd constructed 40 cabins in the territory. A loaded cabin weighs 10 tons with furniture and supplies. That's a lot of weight near an edge. Weight creates stress. Stress creates cracks. Cracks propagate. The cliff fails and takes your cabin with it. The weight is distributed through the foundation over 16 square feet per corner, Ben explained.
and the foundation is 12 feet back from the edge. The stress on the cliff edge itself is minimal, maybe a few pounds per square foot at most. The sandstone can handle 10,000 pounds per square foot before failure. The safety margin is enormous. "And when the north wind hits you with full force," Robert said, walking around the site.
"When a winter storm drives 50-mile-per-hour winds straight at your cabin, that's horizontal force trying to push you into the canyon. Your foundation won't matter if the wind shoves the entire structure over the edge. The canyon updraft deflects the north wind upward before it reaches the cabin," Ben said, repeating what he'd explained a dozen times. "I've measured it. The wind goes over me, not at me." "Measured with ribbons," Robert scoffed. "Ribbons on stakes in summer weather. Wait until winter when the real winds come, when blizzards hit, when the temperature drops to 30 below. Your magic updraft will disappear because the canyon will be the same temperature as the plains. No temperature difference, no updraft, no protection. You'll face full wind force with nothing between you and death but 12 feet of ground." "Temperature differential persists in winter," Ben said. "The canyon is 300 feet deep. The bottom stays warmer than the surface even when everything's frozen. Heat from the earth below, protection from wind, retained solar radiation in the rock walls. The canyon maintains a temperature differential. The updraft persists." "That's fantasy," Thomas said flatly. "I've surveyed in winter. Cold is cold. Everything equalizes. There's no magic warm air." Marcus Brennan came out as Ben raised the cabin walls. "Carter, your north wall is too weak. You need that wall triple thick to handle the wind exposure." "The north wall is standard thickness," Ben said, pausing his work. "Same construction as any Montana cabin. 8-inch diameter logs, notched and chinked. Standard for cabins protected by hills or trees or other structures," Marcus said. "You're completely exposed on a rim. You need triple walls, maybe quadruple. I've seen winter winds on high ground strip bark off trees, Tear roofs off buildings. You need massive protection." "I'm not exposed to full wind force," Ben explained for what felt like the 100th time. "The canyon updraft creates a barrier." "There is no canyon updraft," Marcus shouted, his patience finally breaking. "How many times do we have to tell you? Wind is wind. It goes in straight lines. A hole in the ground doesn't create protective air currents. That's not physics. That's fantasy." "Actually, it is physics," Ben said calmly. "Warm air is less dense than cold air. Less dense air rises. Rising air creates vertical flow. Vertical flow intercepts horizontal wind and deflects it upward. It's basic fluid dynamics." "Basic insanity," one of the other ranchers muttered. "And your windows?" Marcus pointed at the south wall where Ben had framed openings for 4 large windows. "You've got 4 huge windows on one wall. That's where all your heat will escape. Windows are the enemy in winter. Everyone knows that." "Windows facing south capture solar heat," Ben said. "The canyon wall across from me reflects sunlight. Those windows will collect reflected radiation all day, warming the cabin passively. And with minimal wind, heat loss through glass is small." "Reflected radiation," Marcus repeated slowly. "You're counting on reflected sunlight to heat your cabin in Montana winter. Ben, I've ranched here 28 years. Winter sun is weak. It provides almost no heat. You're building a glass house that'll freeze you to death." "We'll see," Ben said, returning to his work. Ben kept building. He finished the cabin walls, installed the roof, built a stone fireplace with proper drawer, carved a door from thick planks, fitted the windows with real glass brought from Denver at considerable expense. He built the barn, smaller than the cabin, just 14 by 18 feet, enough for one horse and hay storage. He positioned it precisely 20 feet north of the cabin, anchored it with the same deep foundation system, built it solid. He dug a well and found good water at 18 feet. Excellent depth, suggesting an aquifer fed by the canyon system. He installed a good pump, built a well house to protect it from weather. He split firewood, calculating carefully based on his heat loss estimates. Plains ranchers split 6 to 8 cords for winter. Ben split 2.5 cords, earning headshakes from every visitor. He installed a rain barrel system to catch water from the roof, since hauling from the well in winter might be difficult if ice made the rim treacherous. The barrels, 4 of them, 50 gallons each, would provide backup water supply and could be melted if they froze. He built a small root cellar, dug into the ground 8 feet north of the cabin, to store vegetables and preserve food at cool, stable temperatures. The cellar was simple, 6 feet deep, stone-lined, wooden door, but functional. Every detail drew criticism. Too close to the edge, too exposed, too dependent on unproven theories, too risky. Claire Harrison visited the finished cabin in early October. She was one of the few people who hadn't openly mocked Ben, and her scientific education made her curious. She rode out on a clear autumn day, found Ben organizing supplies. It's well built, solid construction. The positioning is clever. The barn does create a secondary windbreak. And the canyon updraft works, Ben said. Come here. He led her to the rim, had her feel the air. North wind up on the plains is strong today, probably 15 miles per hour. Feel it here? Claire held up her hand. The air was nearly still. She walked 20 feet west along the rim. Wind picked up noticeably. 20 feet east, same. But at this spot, calm. She pulled out a handkerchief, held it up. It barely moved. That's remarkable. The updraft is real. It's consistent. I've tested it in different conditions over 4 months. As long as there's temperature differential between canyon and plains, the updraft exists. And in winter, when everything's frozen? The canyon bottom is never as cold as the exposed plains, Ben explained. The rock walls hold some heat. The depth provides protection. Most importantly, there's no wind at the bottom to steal heat. That differential is enough to create updraft. Claire thought about the physics. The science holds, but if you're wrong, then I'll deal with it. But I don't think I'm wrong. What everyone in town also witnessed was Ben's continued kindness. When Marcus Brennan's prize mare colicked, Ben rode 15 miles in foul weather to help, staying up all night, refusing payment. When Robert Walsh's wagon wheel broke, Ben crafted a replacement spoke. When Doc Harrison needed help moving a medical cabinet, Ben carried it single-handedly. You're too good to people who mock you, Claire told him. They're worried I'll die. That comes from caring, even if they're wrong. The cabin was complete by mid-October. Ben moved in, organized supplies, settled Ranger in the barn. The first cold snap arrived in early November. Temperatures dropped to 10 degrees on the plains, with 20-mile-per-hour north winds creating a wind chill of -18. Ben checked his conditions. Plains, 10 degrees, 20-mile-per-hour wind chill -18. Rim cabin, 12 degrees, wind under 5 miles per hour, wind chill maybe 6 degrees. A 24-degree effective advantage. His cabin, with a normal fire, stayed at 58 degrees. Plains cabins fought to reach 50 degrees despite roaring fires. People noticed Ben wasn't buying firewood at the expected rate. He must be freezing and too stubborn to admit it, Robert said. He'll admit it when real winter comes, Marcus said. Wait for January. Wait for a real blizzard. December brought more cold. Each time, Ben measured the difference. The pattern held. 20 to 30 degree effective advantage. His cabin stayed comfortable. His firewood pile shrank slowly. And then January came. And with it, the storm that would prove everything. The blizzard arrived January 18th. Ben woke to an ominous sound. Silence. He stepped outside. The northern sky was dark, and he could see it coming. A wall of white moving across the plains like a tsunami. 50-mile-per-hour winds driving snow horizontally, temperatures dropping to -20, wind chill dropping to -65. Ben checked his position. The ribbons tied to posts showed the updraft active and strong. Warm air rising from the canyon was meeting the incoming cold air, creating a barrier. He could actually see it. The blizzard approaching. Then, at a certain distance, lifting upward, flowing over his location like water over a rock. The storm hit the plains with full force. But at Ben's cabin, the wind stayed calm. Snow fell, yes, but gently, almost vertically. The temperature at his cabin, -6 degrees, no wind. Wind chill, -6 degrees. A 59-degree effective temperature advantage over the exposed plains. Ben brought Ranger into the barn, fed him hay, checked that water was still liquid. The barn, protected by the cabin and by the updraft, stayed at 5 degrees. Cold, but without wind, survivable. Ben's cabin, with a modest fire, warmed to 61 degrees. He let the fire die to coals. The cabin held at 57 degrees for hours. On the plains, ranchers fought for survival. Marcus Brennan's ranch house, built strong and solid, faced the blizzard's full fury. Wind chill of -65. Wind found every crack, every gap, stole heat constantly. The fireplace burned at maximum, 4 men feeding it in shifts. The house temperature struggled to 46 degrees. Everyone wore every piece of clothing they owned and still shivered. Horses in the barn, facing -20 temperatures and wind infiltration, began dying. Robert Walsh's house above the general store was barely habitable. Wind chill on the plains made the building flex and creak. The temperature inside, despite a fire that consumed wood faster than he could feed it, dropped to 41 degrees. His woodpile, meant to last until March, was disappearing at a terrifying rate. Doc Harrison's house was the worst. Large, old, poorly sealed. Outside wind chill, -65. Inside temperature, 38 degrees, despite maximum fire. His wife developed hypothermia despite being indoors. His daughter Claire, wrapped in blankets, wondered if the young man on the canyon rim had frozen to death yet. The blizzard intensified. Day 2 brought -29 degrees with 60-mile-per-hour winds. Wind chill on the plains, -78. Lethal. Several ranchers attempting to reach their barns collapsed from exposure. 1 man died. At Carter's Cliff, the updraft held. The canyon continued to produce warm air that rose and deflected the horizontal wind upward. Ben's location stayed calm. Temperature, -8 degrees, no wind. Wind chill, -8 degrees. 70-degree effective advantage. Ben's cabin, with small morning and evening fires, stayed at 56 degrees. Ranger in the barn was cold but safe at 8 degrees. No wind stress, no heat loss from air movement. Ben used maybe 12 pieces of firewood per day. Plains ranchers were burning 50 to 100 pieces just trying to survive. Day 3 brought -34 degrees and maintained 60-mile-per-hour winds. Wind chill on the plains, -83. Civilization ending cold.
People couldn't go outside. Livestock in unprotected barns froze. Ranchers burned furniture, floors, anything combustible. At the rim, calm persisted. The canyon worked exactly as Ben had predicted. Temperature, minus 11 degrees, wind under 5 miles per hour. Wind chill, minus 15. 68-degree advantage. Ben sat at 57 degrees, reading a book, comfortable. He wondered if anyone in town had survived. Day 4. The storm showed no signs of breaking. On the plains, people gave up. Marcus Brennan made a decision. "I'm going to check on Carter." "In this weather?" his wife said. "Marcus, you'll die." "If we run out of wood, we die here anyway. Carter's either dead or—" He couldn't finish the thought. The journey was brutal. 5 miles across killing plains. But when Marcus finally saw the canyon rim in the distance, he saw something impossible. Smoke rising peacefully from a chimney. Not desperate smoke from a fire being fed constantly. Calm, steady smoke from a comfortable fire. He staggered to the cabin, barely alive, pounded on the door. Ben opened it. He wore a simple wool shirt, no coat. Behind him, warmth. "Mr. Brennan, what's wrong?" Marcus couldn't speak. He stared at Ben, at the warm cabin, at the thermometer on the wall reading 56 degrees. "Come in," Ben said, pulling him inside. "You're frozen." The cabin was warm, actually warm. Marcus's ranch house, with 4 men feeding a massive fire continuously, barely reached 46 degrees. This cabin, with no visible fire burning, felt like spring. "How?" Marcus whispered. "No wind," Ben said simply. "The canyon updraft deflects it. On the plains, you're fighting minus 80 wind chill. Here I'm dealing with minus 15, maybe. That's 65 degrees easier. The cabin needs almost no heat." Marcus's hands shook, holding the coffee Ben gave him. "My family is burning furniture. We'll be out of fuel tonight. If the storm lasts another day—" "Bring them here," Ben said. "What?" "Bring your family. Bring anyone who needs shelter. The cabin and barn can hold 20 people. It'll be crowded, but everyone will be warm." "After I called you insane? After I said you'd die?" "You were worried about me. Can't fault that. Now you need help." Ben pulled on his coat. "Let's go get your family." The rescue operation took hours. 22 people crowded into Ben's cabin and barn. The cabin held 14 at 55 degrees, comfortable. The barn held 8 at 12 degrees, cold but survivable. Every person stared at the thermometer. Outside on the plains, minus 34, 60-mile-per-hour wind, wind chill minus 83. At the rim, minus 11, 4-mile-per-hour wind, wind chill minus 15. 68-degree difference, Ben explained. The canyon updraft creates a barrier. The north wind goes over us, not at us. Claire Harrison examined the phenomenon carefully. "It's real. The updraft is consistent and strong. Ben was absolutely right about the physics." Doc Harrison shook Ben's hand. "I told you this location was suicide. I was completely wrong. This is the safest place in the territory." The blizzard lasted 2 more days. 6 days total of brutal, killing cold. Outside wind chill hit minus 90 on day 5. Inside Ben's rim cabin, comfortable warmth using minimal firewood. People safe and sheltered. When the storm broke, people emerged stunned. The mockery stopped instantly. In its place, conversion. Marcus Brennan returned the next day.
Ben, I owe you my life and an apology. I want to build on the rim. Will you teach me about updraft zones? Of course. Within 5 years, 12 families built on carefully selected rim locations, all guided by Ben's understanding of canyon microclimates. Fuel consumption dropped 70%. Winter survival improved dramatically. The canyon rim, once considered the worst land, became the most desirable. Ben and Claire married 2 years after the Great Blizzard. They raised 4 children on the rim, all growing up thinking it normal to live in the safest spot in the territory. Ben Carter lived to 74, dying peacefully in the cabin that proved everyone wrong. The rim house still stands, maintained by descendants, a monument to understanding geography over following convention. The doubters called his home a death trap. They were wrong. It was the safest shelter when conventional wisdom failed. Proof that the most dangerous-looking location, properly understood, can be the greatest refuge.